Welcome to Let's Talk Near Death, the podcast show where we talk about life, death, and experiences somewhere in between. My name is Kirsty Salisbury, the host of the show, and I welcome you to join me as I talk to everyday people with not so everyday experiences. You may also wish to join the conversation on the Let's Talk Near Death Facebook page or access additional VIP content as a premium subscriber via Patreon. For just a couple of dollars a month, you can get an early access to episodes, additional bonus content, and your chance to connect with my guests. To do so, simply visit patreon.com/Kirsty Salisbury. Let's talk near death.
When in just a flash, I went from this state of absolute terror to one of just absolute peace. And when I left the body, that was amazing because I started to see flowers that were blooming from nowhere. So it was that the realization that time and space had vanished.
Welcome back to the Let's Talk Near Death podcast. My guest today is Ingrid Honkala, who was almost 3 years old when she had a near-death experience after falling into a water tank. Since that time, she's been able to see beings of light who have guided her throughout her life and helped her to see beyond this world. Ingrid is also the author of A Brightly Guided Life, How a Scientist Learned to Hear Her Inner Wisdom. Ingrid Honkala, it is great to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks so much for having me here. It's a blessing. It's such an honor.
It's great. I'm so looking forward to our conversation. So take us back. How did this all begin? How did it start? You were nearly 3 years old and you fell into a water tank.
Yes. So this is just one of those things that you never know. Things that you sometimes say it should not have happened, but that's how life presents to us. But yeah, this all happened because back in the day, both of my parents worked and they would leave us at the care of a maid. And she was a young lady that didn't really pay much attention to what we were doing when my parents were not around. And I was born in Bogota, Colombia. There I lived with my parents and my sisters. And back in the day, it was normal to have a lady living in the house with the family.
Yeah.
So my parents left early for work and she went to her room and completely just went to do her thing. And my oldest sister, who was close to 4 years old, I was close to 3, and we had another sister that was 1. Then my oldest sister and I, knowing that no one was watching, decided let's go play at the back of the house where there was a patio. And in this patio, there was a tank. And the purpose of this tank was for collecting water for hand washing clothes because we didn't have a washing machine. So we found a ball in the patio and decided, let's play cash across the tank.
Yeah.
At that age, who's thinking about danger? Let's just have fun.
Exactly.
So we grabbed the ball. The tank was pretty big. It held about 900 gallons of water. So we had to grab a couple of stools. We climbed the walls of the tank, and she sat on that flat surface next to the tank that was just the surface for scrubbing. So she was a little bit safer there. Me, I went to the other side of the tank, and that was a very thin edge. So I just bended my knees, and I was leaning very precariously in this tank. But again, let's just have fun. And then my sister grabbed the ball, and she threw it at me. And she didn't apply enough force. So the ball fell on the water. And I thought the ball was close enough that I could grab it. And then I leaned forward, and when I tried to grab the ball, roll on the surface of the water. And then I lost my balance and fell into the tank. And the first thing, Kirsty, I felt was this sense of the water being frigid cold.
Mm.
And this is one thing people have the misconception. I always like to mention this because they think that because I was born in Colombia, I come from hot weather country. But Bogota is high up in the Andes. So the temperature very early in the morning is usually around 30, 40 degrees Fahrenheit. So the water was pretty cold. So that was the first thing I felt, was this sense of like, the water was frigid cold, and I had that sense that my chest had imploded. And then it came the feeling, the knowing that what is going on, I cannot breathe. Because what happened is that I never have been in a pool. We didn't have a bathtub. So I never had my head underwater.
Wow.
And I didn't know that if you fall in the water, you drown.
Right, okay.
So, imagine the feeling of like, why I cannot breathe, what is going on? And then I tried to come out of this water, but I didn't know how to swim. And my sister was there, but she was too little too. So she did what she could. She tried to reach me, but I sank. It was a deep tank. And it was when I just went in this state of absolute horror. And I was in this state of like fighting, trying to just anguish, complete anguish, when in just a flash, I went from this state of absolute terror to one of just absolute peace. It was just peace and quiet and calmness. Just there was no more need to fight. There was no need to breathe. There was no anguish. And it was just the state of absolute well-being. And then it's when I just like to tell people how much contrast there was in this experience. Because the first thing is that when I fell in the tank and I started to just experience all the drowning, this tank was an area that this was all made entirely of cement, and it had a roof. So this tank was very dark. So even if you will look at the tank from above, it was so dark that it was almost work as a mirror. You could not see the bottom. So when I fell in the tank, what I saw was darkness.
It must have been terrifying.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Then seeing this darkness and just being so helpless. When I went to that state of absolute peace, imagine this amazing thing, a light just came from below. It was like if the light of a candle had been lit, and this soft light was able to illuminate my whole watery surrounding. And then, now there is light. So that even brings you to more peace. And the other contrast was that right before I went to the state of peace, when I was in the state of anxiety and terror, I could hear my heart pounding in my head like a drum. Boom, boom, boom. And then again, in just that second, complete silence. And I also say like to say how to compare this. I live in a house that was very noisy. I had sisters, we had dogs and birds and cousins next door. So there was always noise.
Yeah.
At this moment, it was absolute silence. That sense that when the music had been really loud and now you just go like, oh, this feels good. And I said, to me, this is what I call the silence behind the silence. it felt so good that even later in my life, for years, I craved that silence. And I would look for places to find a silence like that. But then now, okay, I'm in this space. I have light, I have silence, I have peace. And then I started to see bubbles suspended in the water. And then these bubbles were surrounded by light. And I was just like, oh, this is so cool. And then I started to chase these bubbles. And it was like chasing the bubbles is when I turned around and I saw a body suspended in the water. And when I saw the body, it was amazing because it was the realization like, oh, that is my body. And I didn't have the sense of fear. I even didn't feel surprised. It was like, oh, this is familiar. Like it was the sense of this is normal. This already has happened in, I guess, the eternity of my soul. So it was that sense of familiarity. It was like, oh. And then it comes the other contrast. I was born as a very sick child. And it's when I said, when people ask, oh, why children will be born sick? So to me, there's purpose behind everything. And now I understood. I spent the first 3 years of my life feeling unwell. So what happened at this moment when I'm in this state of absolute well-being, what I did is just look at the body and said, oh no, I'm not going back to there. Because I was feeling great. So my at that moment, the realization and the knowing that I have was like I could make the decision not to go back to that body. And then just like that, Kirsty, I turned around and left the body behind. And when I left the body, oh, that was amazing because I started to see flowers that were blooming from nowhere. And then this was just something majestic. And even that sense of dimension just went away when suddenly just the flowers picked me up. And I started just to be carried by these flowers. Wow. And I said that it was the sense like when you go back to the womb and you don't have to do absolutely anything. You're just being done. So I just go like, oh, being carried, nothing to wish, nothing to expect, no place to go, just like feeling at the state of bliss. And then from there, in just like that, a flash, I appear in the maid's room. And she was lying on her bed, just completely unaware of what was happening. And then I was like floating in the ceiling. And I look at her from above and I just say, oh, that's Maria. And this experience, I always mention this because it's so clear, so vivid, that I can even remember that she was listening a soap opera in the radio.
Oh, wow.
And then since she didn't really pay attention to nothing else, in just a flash, again, just in a blink, I appear in my mom's path. My mom didn't have a car, and we live in a neighborhood where she had to walk about 10 minutes before she could reach her bus stop. And she was close to her bus stop when I appear again like that, like looking at her from above. Oh, and I just say, oh, that's Mom. And at that very moment, she stopped. And she did not hesitate. She did not give another step. She just stopped. And she knew that something was happening at home with one of her daughters. And she turned around and started to run back home.
Wow, that's amazing.
Just, yes. And I'm just like, oh. And I'm looking at her from there and I'm like, all right. And then I got distracted because wherever I realized that I put my eyes, my mind, I will go. I love animals. So if I saw a dog at the end of the street, whoop, I'd be there. If I would see a park, anything that called my attention, anything I would put my focus of attention on, I will be there. So it was that the realization that time and space had vanished. It's like I could be anywhere at any time.
Mm.
And I started to play a game of going places.
Yeah.
Just like, this is so much fun. So this whole thing was like, this is so much fun.
Mm.
And then when I'm playing this game, again, in just a blink, in a second, boom, I appear in a realm that was made of pure, bright, intense, shiny light. And it was the sense like, oh, I am home. And it was the first time in the 3 years, almost 3 years of my life that I felt, it's so good to be home. And although I didn't see or hear anybody, it was this sense of you that I was being welcomed. Like when you just get home and just like, home feels so welcoming, so cozy, so good. And it was again that sense that not even 3 years had passed. I just put the example, like if I just left in the morning to go to school or something and back in the afternoon, and it's just like that, like not even 3 years. So it was again this absence of time. And this is the other incredible thing, that although I saw my body in the water and I walk away from it, until this moment I get so distracted with everything that was happening, I didn't really have the realization that I was not Ingrid, that I was not that persona. I guess I didn't just think about it. And it's when I realized myself as a being of light.
Wow.
Like, I am not that. I am not that body. I am not that person. And it's when I started to have that sense that I was just dissolving with the whole. I was kind of like still having a sense of self, but it was just dissolving. And this went even farther from that, because it's when I reached the point that I experienced what I call the state of non-self. I also call it like I experienced nothingness. And when people ask me what nothing means, I said, the moment I tell you something, the moment I tell you what is, it becomes something. So I can just tell you what is not, is the absence of color, movement, sound, concept, description. The only thing I could tell you is that place of just pure awareness, like absolute and pure consciousness. Another thing is that people get scared when I said nothing. Nothing is like, oh, that sounds scary. But I said, no, it's kind of like the sense of nothingness, but at the end is everything. It encompasses everything. So it's just, to me, it was just a state of pure bliss. And when I'm in this just a state right there, my mom finally arrived home. And this is another one of those cool things. She knew exactly where to go. And although we live in a big house, she knew where to go and directed herself to the back of the house where it was the patio. And right there in the tank, my sister was still leaning in the tank, trying to do something to get me. And I just, over time, had the clear knowing that the purpose of my sister just there was to show my mom Ingrid is there for sure.
Ah, right. Yeah.
And she turned around and she said to my mom, Ingrid is there and I cannot get her. Another thing that people ask usually is why your sister didn't go get the lady, the maid, and it was because she was a lady that she mistreated us, so we were afraid of reprisal. So my sister would not have gone to look for help. So my mom, when she realized, yeah, I'm in this tank, she got me out and she said that I was like a raggedy doll. There was no pulse, there was no breathing. I was just completely pale, blue lips. And this is amazing because my mom worked with children and she was trained CPR for children.
Perfect. Yeah. What a miracle.
This is just incredible. So she knew what to do and she started to do whatever she knew. But at this moment, I was so detached from this reality, from this body, from all of it, that I did not feel anything she was doing. It was just like, I was in my bliss. And then it was, again, like everything happened in this experience. It was just in a flash that I felt that I had jumped from the tallest building in the world. And there was nothing I could do to stop this. It was that sense that I was being sucked, that I was being pulled, and I was like, no. To me, it was not like anybody asked me, you want to come back, or none of that. It was like I just was vacuumed back. And I was not happy about that. When I came back, and I knew I was back, when I started to again feel that sense of lack of freedom and pain and discomfort and the coldness, and it's just like I was not a happy child. It was like, I don't want to be here. So from there, things went really difficult for me, for my parents, because as I mentioned already, I was born as a sick child. I had bad like respiratory problems, and so imagine now this aggravated that. And after the accident, I refused to eat. I didn't want to be here. I would look at myself in the mirror and I would scream. I would just tell my parents, you don't understand. This is not me. I don't want to be. I should not be here. This is not my name. And what happened was that when I came back, Kirsty, even though people say, oh, you're just a little child, but no, it was a clear difference. I came back and I just had an awareness that I did not have before. So when I saw my parents, I would just look at them and had the realization they're not just my parents, my biological parents, they are my equal. Because I had experienced the state of oneness. So it was really strange. Like, and when I saw my body, it was like, I'm not this baby. I am not this child. So for me, it was very hard to relate with other children. It became really difficult because I will hear what they say, what they talk, and I'll be like, what is with these people? They don't know anything. The other thing is that I came back with abilities I didn't have before. So right after, imagine I was just close to be 3 and I just started to read and write, resolve mathematical problems, put together complex puzzles. So it was like, and to me, like it kept happening throughout my years. And when even I started school, or when my mom was teaching me anything, it would just be like so easy. And for me, it's like, because I had the sense that I didn't need to learn anything. I was just remembering.
Wow.
So of course, for my parents, it was really hard because at the time, my parents were very young. They was in their early 20s. In Colombia, things were very different back then, and they were forced to marry when they were 17 years old. So they were very young, very naive. There was not concept about near-death experience. That not even the terminology ever heard. And they didn't understand what was happening with this child. Colombia was mainly Catholic country, and they were close to any of this. So it was not even possible to talk about it with the church. And the other thing, Colombia was a country at war. So imagine my parents trying to deal with the day-to-day life, and now, oh my God, this child, they don't know what to do. But they did what they could, and we kept living life hoping that things will change. And for me, thankfully, Kirsty, things happen in the most miraculous way again, because once I was in such trouble, I didn't want to eat. I didn't want to talk to other people. I didn't even want to be touched because I was angry and I didn't know how to express what was happening to me. I didn't have the language. And then it's when the help that I needed just came in the most remarkable way. And it all happened like not long after my near-death experience. I started to have out-of-body experiences, which at the time, again, it was something that nobody knew about it. But I started to just have that same sense. Like I will go bed and I will just see changes in colors, in frequencies, in movements, in velocity. I didn't know what was happening. Actually, it was kind of disturbing because a lot of the things I was seeing and experiencing, I've never seen in this realm. But at the same time, it was amazing because I was being taken to that realm of the light. And it just kept happening and it kept happening. And then, the only thing I really wanted to do those days was to sleep. Because I wanted to be in that light. And then in one of these journeys, one day I just was surrounded by lights. These lights were shining in all different colors. They were everywhere. Just like,
wow.
And then in another journey, one of these lights that was shining in pure bright gold shaped itself into a human form. And it approached me and it touched me. And it's when I said, you are a being of light. So it was like they were showing me that we were alike. And wow, but then I really just wanted to sleep.
Yeah.
And so we had, like, of course, my parents told the other lady to leave, but they hired a new one. And this lady, again, didn't really pay much attention when my parents were gone. So everything happens for a reason. This is incredible because that was okay. It gave me the opportunity to sleep, because if I was sleeping, that was better for her because she didn't have to deal with me. So now I was really, really eager to go to sleep. I wanted to see these beings. And then I kept seeing them.
Did they only come where you only had these experiences when you were asleep?
At the beginning, yes.
Okay.
So I was only seeing them when I was sleeping. So I was just, I have to sleep. But then I'm glad you asked that, because it's when we realized, no, this needs to be balanced, because the universe have to bring this balance, because otherwise I would have just slept forever. Like, I don't want to wake up. I'm having fun here. So it's when, this balance have to happen. And one day I was taking a shower. I was just there, like, I just love the hot water. And then just relaxing there in the shower is when I saw a huge blue, bright, intense light in the bathroom.
Oh.
Now the beings of light are here. And this is beautiful, because when I started to interact with the light here, I started to see them everywhere. I started to heal. Then I started to just feel better, started to eat, wanted to talk, interact with my sisters, my family. It was just the sense of well-being. And through the years is when the teaching or the understanding of this came to me. And it was the realization that what they were trying to show me with all these, Kirsty, is that home is not a place. It's a state of being. So it was not there. It was like, it don't matter if you're there or here. Once you're connected with the light, you're good. So, but the other thing was, although I was doing better and I was interacting and all that, eating all that, I was very detached from my person, very detached from my name. So I would usually just throw these big tantrums about things, especially things that people couldn't understand. Like one evening, and this was the first time the beings of light started to talk to me. It was that evening that my parents, it was time for dinner. They were calling me to eat dinner. I wouldn't pay attention to, so the new maid was calling me, Ingrid, it's time for dinner, Ingrid, and I just would get aggravated. Like, do not call me like that. So she came and she's like, we're calling you for dinner, Ingrid. And I said, don't call me like that. That is not my name. And she just looked at me and she's like, oh, so how should we call you? What is your name?
Yeah.
And I looked at her and I say, I do not need one.
Wow. How old are you at this point?
By this point, I was 4.
Gosh.
4 years old. So they were already, aggravated with my behaviors.
Yeah.
So at this moment, it's like, just go to bed. But look at how everything is now. You asked me about the age and how they deal with all these. Everything is so incredible, and how life just presents itself the way it's supposed to be, because also my parents didn't have enough money at the time to pay for a psychologist, for paying for things like that, because otherwise, not that I think bad about anybody, but it was not understood at the time. So they would have taken me to doctors, who knows what would have happened. So they couldn't do that, and they were just dealing with this crazy girl as they could. So, but things were happening this way. That night they sent me to bed. I was so angry, and I went to bed. I was crying, and it's when I heard the voice for the first time, but it was in such a loving, compassionate, almost like if they were whispering a secret to me. And they said, it is going to take time for them to understand that names are not needed in the realm of the light. And they say, like, you already know. And for me, that was amazing, because it was that realization of like, oh, I understand now why I don't need a name. That I am not crazy. And they continue saying that all the things that were happening to me and all the things that will happen were all gifts. And that these gifts were given to me to help me and to help others. They said, someday your experience will talk for you, and you will be able, this is not for you to keep, you will be able to give. But they say, for now, you have to remain silent, because they are not going to understand. It was not like telling me, don't do this. It was just warning me that they are not going to understand. And I was like, what is not to understand? I mean, like, really? To me, that was the life I was living. I mean, talking to beings of light, seeing all this stuff and knowing all this, it was normal. Like, what is not to understand? But yeah, really quick, I just realized, no, you cannot talk about it. Because the more I try to say, I'm seeing this, I'm hearing this, they will think that I was just making it, that I was just creating stories, that it was not true. And I was just, people couldn't even get it. It was like you're talking in another language. So yeah, very soon I realized, yeah, they cannot understand. And what happened over time is that I started to feel very different. And I started to feel that I was just lonely. I was a person that felt like I was an alien, like I just didn't belong. And I would just get really sad and ask the being, so like, why me? Why this is happening to me? And then the answer was beautiful, was amazing, because they said to me, because you are special. And I said, what do you mean when you say that I am special? And that was even more beautiful, because they say everybody is special, but not everybody knows it yet. So the time will come when everybody will know and everybody will be able to see us. But like we said to you, you have to be silent for now. But they also say, we will be always here to guide you and to help you. And people will be put in your path to guide you and to help you.
Now, I know you're probably really enjoying this episode, but I wanted to pop in and let you know how you can further support the Let's Talk Near Death podcast. Every little bit of input helps me, it encourages me, and it enables me to be able to bring in more guests, share more episodes, and release more content. If you're financially able, you can pop over and become a VIP subscriber for just a couple of dollars a month. If not, you may want to consider leaving a review on iTunes, sharing an episode with a friend, or connecting over with the Let's Talk Near Death Facebook page. Every little bit of input helps me. Thank you for listening, thank you for your support, and I hope you enjoy the rest of this episode.
And I said to people that this is not just for me, this is for all of us. We just don't realize it. And it just appears in the forms of people and books and experiences and all kind of things that appear in our groups, whatever it is, but we just not always see it. And in my case, yeah, it was the way they said. The first person that realized that I could really see things was my mom.
Ingrid, thank you so much for sharing your experience with us. Such an interesting story. I know that our listeners probably have more questions and that there's much more that we want to hear. So if you're listening to this, the great news is that we're going to have a second part to this conversation. So be sure to join us for the second episode where I talk to Ingrid Honkala about her experience, her life ever since her experience, and the profound effect that her mother had on her life. I hope that you'll join us for part 2. Thanks for listening.